I'll have
Sorry.
her introduce herself.
Yep, I am Amy Forrest, also a consultant for the Collaborative Network. Sarah and I refer to ourselves as partners in crime, but we're not.
It's true.
But yeah, we're excited to be here today. This is our third, I believe,
I think so.
Trust Affinity Group meeting. So we're excited. We have just kind of been rolling with these, getting them going, and we're excited to kind of bring some strategies and some ideas and some of your thoughts to the table and start organizing for action. So yeah, we'll go around, and if folks could just do a quick introduction, we'll get into a little bit more of the work that you're doing in your organizations later in the meeting. But if folks just want to do a quick introduction and let us know the organization that you're with, that would be great. Also, I should mention, we'll be recording this for folks that are missing the meeting. So I just want to let y'all know that too.
Well, I'll start. I'm Angela Watkins. I'm a Service Center Manager at Michigan Works Southeast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Gustafson, and I'm with the Community Health Department at Henry Ford Allegiance Health.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angela. I'm with MSU Extension, Community Nutrition Instructor. Sorry about the lack of video, but I still have no internet, so I'm on a hotspot.
Thanks for joining.
I'm Angie Shepard. I'm a program manager with Region 2 Area Agency on Aging, and I'm sort of filling in today. I think whoever normally attends these meetings are busy today, so filling in.
Great, thanks for being here.
Is it maybe Kara?
Yeah, she's my
Yep.
supervisor. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Anyone else want to do a quick introduction?
I see Adam jumped on, but he's on mute, so maybe he'll pipe in when he's available.
Okay, we'll move through. If you are signing in from something that's other than your work computer and you'd like to enter your email, your name and email, we'll be following up after the meeting. I know sometimes folks get on from their personal things, and so it shows different emails, but you are welcome to pop that into the chat if you'd like. Okay, so we'll do just a little bit of an overview. This might be repetitive for folks who have come to previous meetings, but we always like to make sure that we're giving an overview of what we're all about, why we're gathering, and some of the intentions of the meeting. So, as many of you know, the affinity groups are designed to bring folks together to build capacity, support conversations, and move to action. This one in particular is about improving trust between providers and community members, with an emphasis on those that are experiencing inequitable outcomes. So we know that there are a lot of folks or a lot of things happening in our community that folks are they acknowledge that services not might be being used because of a lack of trust. So this is really a gathering space to have those conversations and really move to action with strategies. It is focused on partnering with community members and folks that have lived experience so that we can really understand some of the barriers that they're experiencing and look at strategies and interventions that we can implement to address the issue. Sarah and I are here to support activities, facilitate connections, educate and share resources, and provide technical assistance. So the group is really about all you that have gathered here, but we're just kind of facilitating the conversation. We can provide some expertise in different capacities, things that you might have built a strategy. We can help improve on that strategy, give you some supports to move that forward, really make connections. We've seen some amazing connections come from these affinity groups where folks have gotten on and connected with other people, or we've been able to say, wow, that sounds very similar to something so-and-so was doing in the community. So that's been really a bright spot. We've loved seeing evolve from some of these affinity group meetings. So that's just go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, no, I like that description. Also, really, and we've had different people attend different affinity groups, which will always make sense based on schedule or desire to attend or need or whatever. But it really, we hope that people find value and that they grow because it will only be really as great as the people that attend, and so far, the more people we've had, the more connections that have been made. And we've had some people say like, well, I think this person really should be here, and then it would be my or Amy's role to say, then you should let them know, like, because really we're counting on you all to know if there are voices missing, and hopefully you find value in the conversation, in the content, and the space that that will eventually lead to more people coming and really partnering together. And I guess we'll get into the goals a little bit too, but I wanted to say that.
There we are.
Here we are.
Yeah, so that was a little description of what the group is. Some of you knew, some of you guys are familiar with affinity groups. We've got 3 up and running now, and we'll look at a 4th as the year progresses. But so for you all, we hope that you're able to gain knowledge and skills to drive system change in your organization. We really are looking also to, as Sarah said, make connections and build upon what partners have succeeded or been successful in improving trust. The relationships are huge. We talk about them all the time. Not only relationships amongst other providers, but really with community members. And when we talk about relationships, it's really trusted relationships. Not a quick reach out, not a survey, not a what's going on, but really like understanding what their experiences are, elevating their power to really say that we know that they folks in our community know what they need. We have to build those relationships, those trusted relationships, listen to what they're saying, and adjust the way we behave in our organizations to support them, and to make sure that moving forward, it's not a quick fix. It's not a, well, so-and-so wants us to change our hours, so we'll change the hours, but continuing that dialogue, making sure that the relationships are authentic, and really adjusting the way we behave to meet the needs of folks in our community. And then the track and measure progress. We really, we don't want to keep spinning our wheels. We don't want to implement strategies that are not going to be effective. We want to make sure that we're moving the needle on some of these really deep issues. We have moved to addressing like deep root causes. Those are powerful experiences that people are encountering. And we don't want to just, throw spaghetti at the wall and hope it sticks. We want to make sure that we're, designing strategies, assessing them, reaching out, engaging folks. Is this working? If it's not, let's make adjustments. And let's measure whether or not we're being effective in the things that we're doing. So a little bit about goals and all of the plethora of things that you all will be able to gain from these affinity groups. Sarah, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's great.
Anyone have any questions? Thoughts, concerns? All right. So we'll move on to a little bit of the group norms. We always like to kind of bring these back. Some may have heard them, but for others, they may be new. So Sarah, do you want to run through some of these?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this during the last time we met, and kind of threw it out there as like, I hear some group norms that we'll set for the group, and did anyone have any strong feelings? Should we eliminate? Should we add? We had a general consensus that it was like a good place to be. So as we meet, and many of you, I shouldn't assume, there's a good chance that many of you are a part of groups that have norms. And as we work together, and as we attend meetings together, and as we see each other on a regular basis and develop relationships, we think it's a good idea to have norms set in place so that we are all on the same page about the framework and the setting that we're working in, whether it's virtual or in person. So I'll run through them quickly. The pausing is, kind of obvious, like before you respond or before you ask a question, like just thinking about things before you saying them. The paraphrasing is around paraphrasing someone's thoughts and ideas. So really not assuming that someone meant something, but like, so Lori, I think I heard you say this thing, like, is that true? And gives someone an opportunity to have a conversation versus jumping to conclusions. Posing questions is both around exploring an idea and then also to specify thinking. We hope you all will bring lots of questions to these spaces. We hope to create a space that feels safe to bring questions of all kinds. We may or may not be able to answer them. We are shockingly, we are not the experts in everything. But we are good at connecting, and we are good at knowing people who might have answers. So we hope that everyone brings questions and feels comfortable bringing questions. Putting ideas on the table similarly, and also off of each other, right? So if Angie has an idea like, wait, Lori, I thought I heard you say this thing, like, have you thought about this? And really we're hoping that that is the intent with the space, is that you all will come together. And I feel like I speak for Amy when we say that we think that working together is better than working alone, and like that our brains together are more beneficial than not. Providing data, we are big fans of this, both qualitative and quantitative. And because we kind of set the stage on what Amy and I and our role is, we will be asking a lot about data around like, why are you doing the thing you're doing? Do you have data to support this? And also, if you don't have data, that's okay too. Like, what steps will need to happen to get to a place where we have data? So, and also the data conversations, right? Like, they can be messy and weird. And so anyway, just so you know, that's on the table. We will definitely be talking about data in all the ways. Paying attention to yourself and others, when obviously taking care of yourself, if you need to, keeping an eye on how other people are being in the group and how they're responding. I think just kind of being cognizant of all of our humanness, and then presuming positive attention, and addressing things that need to be addressed, not hiding things, but also keeping in mind that if we assume someone has positive intent, then we can not tell the story in our minds, right, of something that might not be happening. So those are the group norms we talked about before, and we're kind of like stamped of approval last meeting. Does anyone have any thoughts or strong feelings on anything that was covered before we move forward? Or did I miss anything, Amy?
No, I think it's always so great to just set the tone. Like, there's no wrong answers. No one really can make judgment on people's lived experiences. We want this to be like a collaborative space. We want people to feel like, oh, you know what, let's try this. And without feeling hesitant about throwing ideas out there. And it's a no judgment zone. We really kind of want collaborative thinking and thoughts and different perspectives. So yeah, it's just kind of a good way to set the table. Any thoughts on anything we missed from y'all? Okay, it's a quiet group today.
We'll get into the good stuff, and then they're
I
all
know,
gonna
and we
fire up.
are. There we go.
So these are their 14 root causes. This might be new to some of you, and it won't be new to some of you. So these are the root causes that the network really aligns its work around. So you will see that the building trust, improve trust between community members and service providers up in the top right corner is one of the 14 root causes, and that is why we are gathered around today. All of you have said that you are doing work that centers around this root cause. You'll see there are 13 other root causes, and these all came from a system scan that the network did a while ago, and the community said, right, the community partners said that this is the work that everybody was doing. So our intent is to bring people around these topics to help move the needle forward in a larger way than it was happening before. There's a good chance that your work that you're doing probably touches on more than one root cause. I feel like that's pretty normal. In the top left, you'll see the services and policies are equitable and benefit the most vulnerable population. That will be our next affinity group. I think I just jumped ahead slides. That was supposed to be a drum roll moment at the end, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
you know, that was a little
Um,
anticlimactic.
I know, sorry about that. I'm just too excited about it. So, but we are also choosing the root causes to gather around based on the information you all are entering in your partner profiles. So thank you for those of you who have done that. But really it's an opportunity for us to say, what are people working on? What should we gather around? Excuse me. And then how can we all learn from each other? That was a quick version. Amy, do you want to add anything?
No, I think it's good to do quick versions at this point because for some it's repetitive,
Yeah.
for some it's new, but really the big thing is the affinity groups. So one is improved trust, one is about navigating difficult service systems, and our third one we'll be launching is the inequitable policies and or services and policies are inequitable and don't benefit the most vulnerable populations. So I think that's good. Quick, unless anyone has questions, we'll just stop for a minute. Does this make sense to folks?
And there's no pressure to like memorize this or like, I mean, it's on our website and all of that, but this is how we, when we think of our work, and if Angela was to come and say, hey, I have this strategy, one of the first things we would say is, okay, like, where does it fit here, right? So like, how can we drill down and align the work together? Like, oh, you might fit here with this person. And this is the kind of the framework we use.
Okay, one more slide and then we're going to stop talking and you're going to start talking.
It's true.
It is true. So we just kind of like to set up kind of the ideal of what we just want to ground when we talk about strategy work and we talk about interventions in the community. This is the process that we kind of have been following. And it just kind of gives you an idea before we start throwing strategies out there of what we would like to see either you have done or do kind of moving forward. We're really about, I mean, obviously you begin a strategy because there's some piece of data that you have that told you that this needs to happen. And we really want to make sure that we're analyzing that well and disaggregating that data. So you might find that someone's not using your service or someone can't access certain things in your organization. And then we really want to drill down in that data. We want to make sure that we're looking at who is that really disproportionately affecting in our community, and make sure that when we're building these strategies that they're really targeting that population. Getting an understanding of the root causes. So really, making sure that we're hearing voices, we're digging deep, we're listening to community members, in understanding, going beyond our hours of operation aren't, that's why people aren't coming to, my store because the hours don't fit. Well, is that really really getting deep into like, well, why aren't they it could be a completely different thing. So that's really about drilling deep into the deeper root causes of the barriers that folks are experiencing. And then designing the strategies, hopefully, like Sarah mentioned, that address multiple root causes that really can have the biggest impact. Identifying measures, we've talked about data and tracking and how important that is, and then how to implement that in the best way, how to make adjustments if it's not effective, tracking and reporting that progress. So it's a full cycle. It goes back around. Often you'll throw a strategy out there, you need to make adjustments. You go back to the data, you ask more questions of community members as to why your intervention didn't work, and you kind of jump back in the cycle. And clearly engagement is in the center of all that happens. It is about listening to folks, hearing their stories, understanding that their experiences are reality. So it kind of just rolls back around. So that's just kind of grounding us when we're talking in the next section about what we're doing to make sure that these are the questions that we're asking.
And just so you all know, this is like very formal, and then there's like arrows and bubbles and everything, but like this is really the framework that like when Amy and I have in our heads when we're having conversations with you all. So like Adam might say, hey, I'm doing this strategy and it's working great. And I might say, how do you know, right? Like, how do you know it's working great? Because I want to know if he's tracked and reported progress. Or I might say, oh, really? Like, have you chatted with the people that are closest to the problem? So like, without providing like answers to problems, we're hoping that our thought-provoking questions will, like, this is what we're working from always. So just as an FYI, we're never like, we don't want you to think we're difficult, but we just want to, like, we believe so strongly in this model.
How do you know is our favorite question.
It is. It is.
We keep asking that. Well, it's working. How do you know? Well, I want to do this. How do you know? All right.
Oh, let me get the.
There's everybody again. Don't like it when you're all shrunk in the corner of my screen.
I can enter the Padlet link in the chat there for people. I don't think we talked about it.
Okay, do you have that in there? Okay. So Sarah just entered a Padlet link in the chat. If you copy that and paste it into your browser, we'll be able to do some kind of interactive sharing of strategies that's happening in your organization. So this is where we stop talking and you all start talking and sharing and connecting. You'll see it on the screen, but you won't be able to obviously touch it on the screen. You'll have to open in a separate browser. But we really want to know, and we want to start talking through what's going on in your organizations around building trust. If you look at the screen, there's a little pink button on the bottom right. That's how you add things that you want to share out. Also, do not feel like you need to use this. Sometimes it's complicated for folks to be switching screens and sharing screens, etc. So feel free to unmute. This is conversation. This is talking about what's going on in organizations. So it is real time. So if you start typing into it, it'll pop up on your computer. Again, we are not judging typing. We are not judging sentence structure. We will flush a lot of these out later. It can be hard to be typing on little post-it type notes on your computer that pop up live. But it's a creative way to kind of share spaces and share the same platform. So, but again, you don't have to use it. If you're on the phone, you can unmute. If you do not have dual screens, etc., we can just kind of start into the conversation. But it's really, so what is going on? What are you guys working on?
Well, I'll go ahead and speak because it's going to be easier for me to do that than try and quantify it into anything that even resembles a structure. And I don't even know if this is a good strategy, but it's one of the only strategies that I know, because to me, everything's about relationship. And going back to that statement, nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. So one of the things that I've been doing this summer is I'm just showing up at events. I'm not even tabling, because I think they get used to people, with a table of resources and things in front of them. And so they hear about the agency. They don't hear about the people in the agency. So I've just been kind of showing up, like Southside Summerfest is a perfect example, that I'm just showing up to the events and meeting people. Some of the people I've seen every time that they've been there, and I'm starting to just become Adam. And then after I become Adam, then I can be Adam from Home of New Vision and Adam, the Jackson Area Recovery Community. So I know it's a long, drawn out process, but I know the process that got us to this distrustful situation that we're in to begin with was long and drawn out. So as Sarah will relate to, we're making maple syrup with this right now.
Nice callback, Adam. Nice.
So Adam, I have to ask, so I wholeheartedly support and agree with the way that you're approaching this is building relationships. Do you have a next step in mind as far as better understanding what they're experiencing, or asking questions or getting really their feedback, things like that? Like, do you feel like, are you hearing what problems are? Are they talking?
No, that's part of the problem. And that's why I say it's going to be a little bit long and drawn out. We've got it set up where we're going to do a couple focus groups, small focus groups, but even finding 8 people to participate in the focus groups who see themselves as somehow in recovery, needing recovery, or having substance use issues is very difficult, because that requires trust and vulnerability to acknowledge that to somebody. So we keep putting things out there, but we're also not holding ourselves hard and fast to what we think the plans are, because we don't want to run the risk of appearing like everybody else. And I don't mean that in a negative way. And when I say that, I mean historically. I don't necessarily mean that that's what everybody else is doing right now, but that's what everybody else has done. I don't even like the term focus group. You know, I'm trying to rebrand a lot of these things in a way, you know, they're listening sessions as far as I'm concerned. And I think that that's a little bit more of a proactive approach. So all of this, the other problem that we naturally have here is that we are like on a skeleton crew. We've got minimal people here, and we're open to the public on a regular basis. So we're a little bit of a crisis center too. So I do what's in my job description, maybe an hour and a half a day, and I do everything else, you know, for the other 6.5. So the best laid plans, but I think it's the only way to kind of do it. I'm a relationship person, and you just have to establish relationships. I always tell my brother this. He's always trying to be impressive. I said, stop trying to impress people and just worry about becoming impressive. And so I think it's the same thing when it comes to trust. Instead of trying to get people to trust me, I just try and be trustworthy and believe that it'll happen.
It's awesome. I love it. Yeah, it's really, and I love the way you're thinking outside the box and trying to move away from the historic way that we've done things in our community, because we haven't seen the needle move as much as we should. So yeah, I like getting rid of the focus group wording. I like building relationships, and even reaching out to the folks that have turned down your focus group or your listening session. I loved that way. Finding out why they're not coming, you know, having those conversations, because there might be stigmas around it, or there might be something very simple that, you know, folks might say, well, culturally, if we want to come, you have to do this, or A, B, and C. So it's just keeping those open dialogue. It's good stuff.
Amy,
Yeah.
here at Michigan Works Southeast, we also, I think, Adam, I met you last week, didn't I? Yeah, okay. We're doing like Adam, we're getting out in the community, because the community, the individuals that could really use our services don't know about our service. And it could be for a lack of trust or just not knowing. And so we're getting out in the community to tell the community about the services we offer and that they're free. So that's something, I guess that's one of the strategies. I think it's, what was it? People not knowing about our services or something to that effect, but then also people not trusting. I think that was another root cause.
Yeah, I love that you're calling out the root causes, Angela.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You're tying it in, you're aligning the stuff that we're doing.
Right.
And I love
So
that
it's
you
kind of twofold. They don't know about the services, and why do they not trust us that we can help them? Maybe they've been told that, you know, oh, you'll have to pay, or you'll have to give them all your information, and that's not so. So I think there may be two root causes that are preventing individuals from knowing about our services and utilizing our services.
And I think Angela's being too modest, because they're not just showing up out there. They're showing up out there in a caring fashion. They're showing up out there in numbers. So you always get, you know, some personalized attention. We were also out at Andy's place. And so they were like on the spot, made sure that they worked with this young lady. She went from, I think I'm going to apply to Denny's basically because that's the job I think I can get, to all of a sudden they've got her already hooked up and she's doing her onboarding at Henry Ford in one setting, because it was like she got surrounded by ants. And I don't mean A-N-T, I mean like ants, it's family. everybody
Like-
came around her and it's like, what do we need to do for you, niece? And took care of her. And so I think that's hugely important. And I love the way you guys are doing it.
Yeah, you know, if they're not coming into the center, we're gonna go out to where they're at and meet the people where they're at and try to assist them. And then eventually get them to start coming into the center.
I'm glad that you said that, Angela, because sometimes, right, like I would imagine that Adam's description of this event, like this young woman or this woman, her experience and resulting in a position or a job or whatever, I would imagine that would increase her trust for what you might have to offer. And then if you were to say, hey, I have this other resource for you, she might believe you more, right? Because you have met a need. And I have some, I'm a social worker. I have some qualms with Maslow, but I do think that if you can meet basic needs, if you can help people meet their basic needs, they will trust you. And that to meet others, and not like in one setting, I'm not naive and all of that, but right, like there is a needle that's moved there. And so then like if you were to say, hey, my friend Adam could help you with blah, 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 they'd be like, oh, well, I will trust her because like she just helped me with this huge life thing. She's not going to steer me wrong. You know, I don't know. That might be overgeneralizing, but that's just my.
No, I think you're right, Sarah, because I've tried to make community partners, in the community of Jackson, and it helps. The word of mouth helps more than any, marketing that we could ever do, right? Because of that relationship. And that's what I really struggled with, I think, because I was at Extension for 3 years before the pandemic. And even then there were certain organizations that, still were like, oh, I don't know, not really knowing and understanding what we did. So I was constantly trying to get that word out. But then, he touched on the numbers, Adam, that you just said. We don't have the numbers. I can't be at every health fair. It was literally just me in this position. And we're supposed to, I think in its heyday, Extension had like 12 in my position years ago. And so I can't be everywhere all the time. We don't have the resources to be, out and like spreading the word. So I don't know. I've just really struggled with that. And I really do think that word of mouth and the relationships, they can all, frog hop each other and kind of piggyback off of on each other. For me, at least, that's really helped.
And I've got some of your information here too. And so a lot of times when I go to different places, I bring other people's information. As a matter of fact, because I work here at Home and New Vision, but I also volunteer for Nation Outside, who does a lot of these events. And so I do multiple things at the same time. And I think that's important too. So like this on the 28th, when I go down to the Southside Summerfest, I'm not tabling, but I'm sitting with Jackson District Library because they invited me because I needed somewhere to be. And so kind of having them seeing us kind of working together, especially when, Angela's already been out there. I've already been out there. You might not be able to go to all of them, but you might be able to see us at one and just hang out with us and take some pictures and stuff like that, because that's like free publicity. And again, you'll just become Angela. And again, you minimize some of what you do. You can't be everywhere, but you certainly do your best to it. And in a virtual world, you were trying to be, just nobody was showing up for all the places that you were. So give yourself some credit.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I actually started doing that probably about a year into the position. I started carrying around a binder basically with resources in it to connect people to food resources or other resources. Anytime, they were doing interviews or they were doing a youth, program at CAA or whatever, I would try to print those out, copies of those out, and put them in a binder and carry them around with me. That way, if somebody said, hey, I'm kind of looking for these things, I could be like, hey, I actually know about that, so yeah, I totally agree with you. We, having each other's resources and information also can really help establish that trust, because exactly what you said, Sarah, if you make a contact with one person and then you're going to trust that person to refer you to somebody else.
I think there's something too that I have got a little bit of feedback from people on in the Jackson area about where some of the lack of trust stems from too. And I don't think it's something that can necessarily be avoided, but it can be something that we can be aware of and start to address. And that's turnover in a lot of positions, because a lot of people will rotate from one agency to another. And so people don't even know who necessarily to contact. They don't know what their title was, so they don't know who to contact in the next position. But I think that's also the reason why it's so important to be able to establish those relationships as the individuals we are. So then wherever they contact us at, wherever we're at, we know who the other person is in that position, and we can directly tie them in with those things. Because I've just found that, I mean, I've been at this job for a year, and it was the COVID year. And so all the stuff that I went from 2019, nobody was in the position that they were in. None of the contact people, were the same for a lot of the things that I was doing. So I can imagine how frustrating it is when you're trying to link with resources and stuff, and you're once again getting spun, or at least it feels like you're getting spun. So.
Right. It's a good observation, Adam. And I think that turnover will happen no matter what, right? That's part of organizational, that it happens. But I would like to think deeper about that. So yes, we show up as who we are, and they will then have a trusted relationship with us. Is there something that we can do within your organization that maybe like looks at your job description or the onboarding process for people within that role that will adjust the way that they interact? So if you found something that works for you and you realize that it's about showing up or it's about building relationships, can you go back and look at your onboarding practices in your organization to emphasize that? Can you go back and look at your job descriptions when you're hiring for your replacement that ensures that those connections continue to be made, or the outreach that you're doing continues to happen? So yeah, it's inevitable, but there are like if we go back and think, had I applied for this job today, I would have said these 3 things in my job descriptions because they're critical to the connections that we're making. So just food for thought on, we can't change turnover, but can we change the way that we're onboarding the next people, or change the way our organization interacts?
I love that you said that, Amy. And I had actually similar thoughts as Adam was talking around this piece. And we've talked about it probably every trust group gathering we've met, and the varied layers of mistrust between different populations of people for valid reasons. And there's a piece in there of like, I will 100% admit that like I have favorites. Like at my doctor's office, I want to talk to this one person because I know she's going to take care of me really well. Like, right, like that, it's just how it is. And also like, what could we do? So say, for example, there's mistrust between Adam, like you are real, well, all of you, but like you're talking about these really strong actions for people to trust what you're saying. So, but at some point, right, like we will not be in these positions forever. So are my actions also helping heal the relationship between the organization and the community? So yes, I'm so happy that I met Adam. I can't remember where he was from, but he was a great dude, and he really was helpful for me. But maybe the next time we meet, you're like, just as a reminder, I am from New Vision or whatever, so that if you move on, because the truth is we are not immortal, and someone will take your place. So, but I know, I'm sorry to break the news. But like there will be someone that carries the torch for all of the great work you've done. And have you built a thing that they're like, oh my gosh, New Vision, I tell you what, Adam really worked hard to do this thing, and New Vision is just, I trust whatever he is like set up, or even if it's not like, doesn't have to be perfect, right? But like, what actions are we doing to say, like Amy said, like, oh man, actually, like, there are some policies or practices that I thought were great, and they're not having great outcomes. And I'd like to listen to the community and change that, so that the trust between the organization, even if you're the face, but like, how do we also then capitalize and like multiply that so that the trust is only increasing?
One of the things that I'm finding to be useful in this situation is a really simple approach, because I think a lot of to a lot of people that don't trust us, it's because it's an us and them situation. So I've been doing everything that I can to recruit in some ways, because like you said, eventually many of us move on. And so I'm always talking about, yeah, man, I'd like to see you doing this. And so all of a sudden you can be working with me. Maybe you can have my job someday, because then you can expand on the work that we're doing now and making it a more inclusive thing. And Angela and her team did the same thing out there at Andy's place, because one of the jobs they were talking to her about was a possible receptionist gig at Michigan Works. And you should have seen the look on her face. She was like, what, a career? I can work with you guys? Because I think this trust thing, we've overcomplicated it. It might be generational. There's no doubt about that. We have to acknowledge these things. But I think once you acknowledge these things and you start dealing with people on a personal level, and see it as always, I mean, go back to the days. This is like tribalism in its own form, oldest form, that you're recruiting people, kind of to your tribe. That's what it is. And it's like, you're a part of me. We're connected. Let's see what works best, instead of just reaching out to give people a hand. You give people an opportunity to reach back out and give you a hand too. So when I'm talking to them about the listening sessions, I'm just not just pitching the idea that, here, we'll pay you $50 to do this, to come in. Can you help me out? Is the way that I'm putting it. And that's the only way I'm getting a positive response is, sure, I can help you out. Well, and I'll help you out because we do have a few dollars put aside for it. It's some of that's hard for people to understand, that it can actually be that simple, but most people don't want to be pure recipients of something. They want something more reciprocal. So if you can give them an opportunity to kind of be a part of something, I think that helps to develop trust too.
I like your thinking on that, Adam. I'm going to throw out something else, because we've been working, not for you specifically, but for the group, but we've been working on, how do we better hear from a specific group in the community about our healthcare services, and knowing that we're not doing a good job of that right now. The survey we send out to all our patients after a visit doesn't really do the job. And so we have a couple of community members that have joined a work group. We're trying to talk through what's a better way of hearing from people in the community. And so this is, I guess, not so much because we want to promote what we do, but we want to understand how to make changes. And so what we're hearing and know is that maybe we're not the ones to go out and do that outreach, especially because we're wanting to understand the needs of the Black community. And so these two partners are saying clearly to us that Black people need to be asked by Black people. And so, it is as good as my intentions might be, or other, folks at Allegiance, if they are not representing that community, then it's not going to be successful. And I'm just wondering how other people have overcome that, how you have used, others to extend your reach.
Lori, just to confirm, it sounds to me like you have gathered data about you've already gathered data to show whatever, a lack of something you have. And so then you're like, I would like to develop an intervention. We've got it. And then you listened again to data and community members and adapted and altered your intervention to then like partner with people who could actually gather. So I just want to like make sure I'm on the same page, because that's great. Like, to me, like, it shows also that you saw a gap, a need. I would have done the same thing. Like, all right, we need some specific data from the community, right? And it sounds like that's where you're at that point, right?
Yeah, we're in the middle of that process. So this is really before we would design any strategies. We
Mhm.
have to kind of understand what we're dealing with, what the root causes are, because I think there are multiple layers of those root causes. They go deep when it comes to healthcare
Yeah.
and certain folks in our community. But it's been a challenging process.
And that's a slower process too, because that's what we've been finding is, it's kind of like, where do you get on this, where do you get on this ride at? Where in the rotation do you get on this ride at? So that's why I just started showing up, is because we couldn't find some of the people that we wanted to have, filling certain positions. Like, we had an opening here for a recovery coach, and I did all I could to keep it open for like 4 months, because I wanted to have a Black male in the position so that he could speak to a population that nobody else could necessarily speak to, because he would have a different, set of experiences and stuff. And didn't happen. There was like no applications. So that's when I started realizing that I just have to start showing up. And if I start showing up, maybe they'll start showing up. And when they start showing up, then we can coach them up. And when we coach them up, then maybe we can, do the next generation of coaching. I mean, using an NFL analogy, there's a lot of the reasons why they've had a hard time integrating the coaching situation is because it's about who you know. And so a lot of the white coaches knew the other white coaches, and a lot of the Black coaches didn't know a lot of Black coaches because they didn't exist. So you couldn't even get in the room for these conversations. So I'm doing my best to kind of be that, avenue. Because the other thing is that just because you have someone who's Black doesn't mean that he's going to be or she's going to be accepted by the Black community, because their experiences might not line up. So that's a part of it too. And I don't know if you guys know much about my history, but my history includes decades in the Michigan Department of Corrections. And so I have a different kind of understanding of oppressed people than a lot of people do, because I've lived with them, and I cared enough to, pay attention to what's going on. I mean, I guess if I was a college student, it'd be an ethnographic study, because I was embedded in the community for a long time. So my passion for it is genuine because of the relationships that I formed with people, and it takes time to be able to do this. But I also applaud you guys for doing that work and being willing to do that work. And we have to make sure that our the people after us, the people that follow us, don't give up on this work, because that's one of the reasons why trust is so difficult to do, because they've seen plenty, good intentioned people come into their neighborhood, and 2 years later they're gone because funding or whatever is gone, and they're no longer the flavor of the month.
I would say that trust is really challenging to gain, really easy to lose. It doesn't take much, and we're, human, we're flawed people. And so it's kind of a one step forward, 2 steps back sometimes.
We've talked about this. I love this conversation. In the network, we have employee team meetings. We're meeting every other week around equity and anti-racism topics. And we've talked a lot about this because we are white women doing this work, and in the acknowledgement of it and what comes with that. And also the piece around what you just said, Lori, around like, can you show up can I show up in my current state, doing my best, learning and unlearning, shifting. I truly believe that how I operate this month is different than how I operated last month. If I'm going to be really honest, like how I show up, who I'm centering, how I feel about things, the language I'm using. And also I have found different pockets of places of trust and accountability where I feel comfortable showing up, knowing that I'm probably gonna like mess up somehow. Because I was raised in a society that is a certain way, and it favors and caters to people that look like me. Except for the fact that I'm not a man, I have a lot of other privileges. And I have found a lot of how do I say it? Like I feel I have been grateful to find a lot of spaces that hold accountability, like, and also and humility and all of these things. So like, can we do these things? And I feel like we can, and it won't be perfect and messy, but I just want to acknowledge that because we're in it too, right? And also, like, to your point, Adam, like I have felt so much joy and inspiration in looking at our younger generation, because I think the fact that we're having this conversation right now, that we have barriers in place around hiring, we have like very close, that hits home, we'll say that, right? Like we have all been a part of hiring processes, or we've been a part of teams that don't look like the community we serve. I am that. I am a part of that, right? So how do we hold that, acknowledge it, and then change it? How can I change a policy? How can I help change a policy so that the next people coming up, so that when the next generation, they're fired up. It's maybe not overgeneralization, but they are so, I feel like they've got it. They are more progressive than we are. They've got climate change on the brain. They're like ready. So like, how do we help them? How do we set that up so that when they start applying for jobs, there's not like if Adam's successor puts out an email saying we're looking for diverse candidates, that there is an equal pool. How do we do that? And so I love that we're having this conversation, because we might not have the answers, but at least we're talking about it, and at least we're saying, yep, this is pretty messy, this is where we are, and like, and then what? How do we move forward?
And we have to be willing to have it be messy too, because the other risk that we run, and I found this out. I was on a podcast called Both Sides of the Conversation. And the conversation was Afrocentric, and I knew that it was, but I knew that I have to show up for conversations like this too. And at one point in time, I said something basically along the lines of, basically, I'm counting on you to help clean up a mess that we created. And one of them was basically like, why does it fall back on us?
That's right.
And so that's part of the point behind this is that we have to be willing to have these difficult conversations. We have to be willing to show up in places where we may not feel the most comfortable, and we may be the minority in the room. We have to be willing to show up and make mistakes as we go along, because whether we like it or not, our privilege came from somewhere, and we have some ancestral responsibility in this.
Right.
And so therefore we have a responsibility, for it now. So these might not be the ideal circumstances sometimes to show up in these things, but sometimes the alternative is worse. So better to kind of show up. I mean, the event that we're doing, that I'm going to be there for Summerfest on the 28th, the Black Business Expo. I'm still there supporting Black business, because it shouldn't just be them supporting their businesses, So there's a lot of different ways that we can go about doing this, and it takes time. And the longer we put this stuff off, more time that's wasted. So we've all got our advantages in some way, shape, or form. The question is, what are we doing with them? Are we using them for good or for nefarious means? And are we preparing the next generation to be more successful and to continue with the work we're doing? Or will they be starting over like a lot of us, started over with this stuff again? The fact that we're still talking about DEI in 2021, like it's a clever idea or something, is to me preposterous, because we wasted a lot of time in the concept of equality, because equality could never be, because people weren't starting in the same place. Equity should have been the conversation from the beginning. And I think that needs to be shouted from the rooftops. So.
Well, Adam, you're hired. Just we have the equality and equity talk often. Yeah. Because not everyone is there. Sorry, go ahead, Lori.
Oh, I just was afraid we might have just had Angela have to step out. Oh, there she is. Angela Watkins. Can you, and this might, I'm sorry, Amy and Sarah, this might be off topic.
No, this is where we want this to go.
Can you help us? Because I currently have a position I've been holding for about 6 months to find the right person. Can you help us understand the folks that come through Michigan Works trying to, get education or into a position that works for them, some of the barriers they're facing, especially those people of color?
Well, okay, and you're talking about positions you have at the hospital. I would say, and this is like my daughter is an MA. And so when she was actually going to Jackson College for her MA position, she had went to Central. So she had a bachelor's in, what was it? Occupational or something sports and something medicine. And so she could only find a on-call position there at Henry Ford in the behavioral health department. So she took that. So it was just on call, but she couldn't find a full-time position there. So she took that. So she ended up moving to Ann Arbor, working at U of M and all of that. And so, of course, when she moved there, she had to quit at Henry Ford. So now she's moved back here to Jackson, and she has applied. And she has applied for an MA position and has never gotten an interview or call or anything. And, some people are saying, if you ever work there and if you leave, then you're like blackball. Then you could never get back in there. So, she's a certified MA and she's trying to get into Henry Ford, and she's applied. She can't, for whatever reason, she can't even get her resume looked at or anything.
That's shocking, because they need folks, and and she needs experience, but she's
and she has it. She's been working now. She's actually at the Center for Family Health.
Is she?
Yes.
Well, you connect her with me. I'm not on the clinical side, but I'll figure out what the, where's the barrier, but
right,
why?
The barrier. And I'm sure she is not the only one. Pretty much people say it's very hard to get into Henry Ford. You have to know someone. So there's truly an issue there, and it lies somewhere in HR, because she's not the only one. But I'm just saying, this is my daughter, and I truly believe I've watched her apply. I've watched her, and I know she has. And I've heard the same thing from other people, that it is so hard to get into Henry Ford. You have to know someone. And so there's something there in the HR that is blocking the candidates that you're really seeking.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Is it possible also, I also want to hear if Angela has like other general employment barrier pieces, but my previous position, I worked at Michigan Department of Education, and I feel like larger institutions, isn't that like, I feel like the state of Michigan is, I live in Lansing, so I'll say like the reputation is that you cannot get into the state of Michigan as an employer unless you know someone, which means that it is full of a lot of middle class or wealthy white men and some white women. So there's a similar thing. There's a similar and they also weed out resumes if they don't like you, right? For whatever reasons, everything gets screened out. So I wonder also if that's also an institutional thing. And I'm just throwing it out there because I've heard the same. And then I worked at MSU for a while, Michigan State University, and it was a little similar as well. Like, oh, you know someone, let me, and so sometimes that's helpful, but not when you're in a place of privilege or not privilege, right? And so
right. Yeah. So I don't know. Like I said, she's not the only one. I've heard this several times, and like we have your postings up in our resource room. And I mean, there's just quite a few. But people say, and we'll show them and they'll be like, you can't get in there. You have to know someone. So sometimes they won't even try because they have heard from other people. And there again, there's that lack of trust that, you can't get in. So, you're here, Lori, you're wanting to want answers to questions to why, and it's right there in your HR. It lies right there for whatever reason. I don't know if you have some, like if the computer scans the resumes and they're looking for keywords, and if you don't have that keyword in your resume, then it doesn't get pulled for that position. I don't know if that's the way it's done, or if an individual goes through and I'm sure you get hundreds of resumes, so that may be kind of hard for an individual to do. But here, I look at the resumes. I've just, matter of fact, one person, he just started today, and another one hopefully will be starting in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But when we receive resumes for positions, I scan them. I read each and every resume. Let's see, before COVID, last time I had to do 130 resumes. Wow. This time it was only 30, so that was a lot less. But I myself in this position that I hold, that I know of, I've been here, I would say 20 years. And I am the first African-American, male or female, to hold this position in this organization. So now that I'm in this position and I'm looking at, I live in this community. And so I see the people that live in this community. I want this center to reflect the community that we live in. So I make it my purpose to have it be diverse. Before it was all white females, except for myself and another African-American lady. There were no males. There were no African-American males. So I made it my purpose to seek out and make this center diverse as possible. And so I know in certain areas we didn't have a male, we only had a female. And so I made it my purpose that, okay, I'm not gonna just say, well, he's okay, but he's a male, I'll take him. No, if he's a male, he's the best candidate we're hiring. And so thankfully we were able to do that. And so I actually have hired 2 males. One is an African-American, one is Caucasian. But that's what I needed in order for this center to reflect the community that we live in.
Yeah, I think that's powerful, Angela. And it goes back to what Sarah said, that I think that you have committed yourself to doing that, and you have the ability to do that because you're a smaller organization. I mean, it's the time, but yes, still you can do that. And I feel a lot of constraints because we're a big system, and I have hired within a small nonprofit before. Piece of cake, because you just walk over to the HR person's office and say, hey, who do you have? Put through anybody, I'll screen them all. But I struggle to do that. And so I've worked, closely, and I'm community health. I'm not hiring those clinical positions, but it takes a lot of navigating a complex HR system. And I appreciate you highlighting that, and especially the fact that the perception is you're not going to get in unless you know somebody, because that's a very dangerous perception for us. And we've got to figure out how to get past it.
I can
So-
give you an example that goes in that same vein too, because Andy's place is specifically referring people down there now. I don't know, there was some kind of deduction. I don't know if it was Community Action Agency or what. So people from Andy's place are applying for some of these positions. Now, if you're at Andy's place, you have a felony. And some of them are still being told that they can't get the job because of the felony. So having such a big organization, I think what happens, what you were just describing, is this disjointed effort at things, because one department says this is what we're going to do and the other department hasn't quite come around to that way of thinking. And I've found with a lot of these things, they're not even actually policies, they've just been protocols that people have been doing. Because with my time in prison, a lot of places that I applied for, they're saying, well, come back in 12 months, come back in 18 months. And then I went back and researched the policies and it didn't say that anywhere. You know, it was just an arbitrary number that somebody decided if you can stay out for 18 months, then you must be trustworthy. But what is that person supposed to do for those 18 months? That's when they need some stability to get to that point. So like you said, with a smaller organizations, you're a little bit more nimble. I mean, Glynis interviewed me. And Glynis was like, you're a miracle, you're hired, you know, but everywhere else I would go to the hiring people, I do the interview, and I used to say I was 30 for 30 on interviews. Everybody wanted to hire me and none of them could, because when they sent it up to somebody else, they're like, no, we're not taking that shot. So I don't know. I don't know how to fix it, but that's another obstacle is that sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing or why they're doing.
That is so true, Adam. And that was here. I just assumed, and I just thought that we could not hire someone that had a background. I hadn't seen the policy, but I just assumed that that was the case. And so not until I brought it up to HR, can we? There's a candidate I think that would be great for this position, but I know he has something on his background. And she was like, it's not written in our policy, but I just assumed. And so when she told me that, it was green light and we went ahead and we hired him and he's doing a great job. But you're right, we just assume that it is, and it's not always.
Thank you for sharing that, Angela. I think that is also a good point to share that the assumptions also that just kind of carry with our day-to-day work, or unless they're brought up or unless they're challenged, right? And there's always, it pains me to admit, right, that if you have like two candidates or two resumes in front of you and they look kind of similar, but one like has either no background, no record, or maybe one has something just a little, you're like looking for a reason to pick the better candidate, right? Whereas maybe with these conversations, we can look to hire someone who actually, like there's an equity lens in there instead of just let's pick the best one. There's actually also a piece of like, this person, how do we have better representation, and also all of it. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that.
Really quickly on that too, something to think about is most people don't think about it this way. If somebody's applying to any of the positions we're talking about, they're usually a little bit more established and have a little bit more confidence in their ability to be able to kind of, you know, hold things together. And one of the very things that got many of us in trouble criminally is loyalty to the wrong things. So I promise you, when you hire some of the people that you're worried about what they're going to do, if you hire them, they're going to be loyal to you like nobody else would, because they're going to be so appreciative that they actually have a genuine life that they can build something on, that they will defend you to the death. So,
Adam, I appreciate that perspective, because I will admit that I did not make that correlation or connection. Like that, I mean, it makes sense as you say it, and obviously you have credible experience to that, but I wouldn't have thought of it that way, you know?
Yeah, the loyalty piece is huge. I also think, Sarah, to your point, when you were talking about you've got 2 resumes side by side and you're looking at this might be a better candidate, like that is the equity piece of like if you hire a diverse candidate, that's a building trust piece, right? So that is making your workforce look more like your community members. And that is like, so yeah, I mean, we really have to think outside the box and qualifications.
And something they were talking about that I hadn't thought about, the idea of assimilation is not diversity either. So not only once you bring people in, they have to be able to have an authentic voice while they're there. So it truly diversifies what you're doing, because unfortunately what has been the status quo in the past is certain people have been invited into the room if they'd act like everybody else in the room.
That's right.
And that kind of defeats the purpose. That's not really diversity. You know, you might have different hues in the room, but the diversity piece has been kind of quelled. So I think that's the other thing that we do too, is we're letting people know, listen, no, I don't just want you in the room because you're a Black male or a Black female or Hispanic. I want your voice. I want to hear, we're not going to be able to fix this until we actually hear what's really going on. It's kind of like the same thing with therapy or coaching. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me what we need to hear so that we can address this, you know, and I think that's another component that we can constantly be sharing is that, you know, diversity is about experience more than it is just about, you know, race, ethnicity, gender, things like that. We need diverse experiences in the room.
I love that you said that, Adam, and this conversation and the point has come up a lot in our internal meetings as well, because what you're saying really is that you believe that all human lives have equal value, right? And the society that we have, that we live in has already assigned different levels of value to different bodies based on what they look like. And we talked about this last week, and I think it would be remiss to not acknowledge like people with disabilities as well when we have this conversation around representation and equity. And we have a long way to go, right? But like, I just think as we're thinking about things from an equity lens and trying to change policy for future actions and generations and all of that, to me, you're right. Like the way we work right now, like is like smooth and cohesive and we have a thing going, but like, is it the right way? You know, or is it complete? I don't know if that's the right word, but you know, like, and to me, it's not even, it's like we should have things that equally represent the community, and also we are valuing them as humans. I value this person as a human and their life experience, and I sure hope they show up differently, you know, and like how I respond to that is something that I have to deal with and be like, oh, I'm not sure if they're, you know, in the meeting correctly or whatever happens, right? Like if things get disrupted, that's kind of the point. Like I'm trying to check that in myself, if I'm going to be honest, on like how things should look or should run or should feel, and like and trying to own some of that discomfort as I hope more things get disrupted that way. I don't know.
Lori, I just wanted to check. Did I answer your question you asked? I went off on a little.
No, it's so interesting too, because I was going to loop back to that too and have Lori expand a little bit about what she can do.
Yeah.
Well, you did, as far as, you know, a perception about allegiance. I don't know about in general, as you're trying to help folks, you know, find employment. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, now, if they come to our center and we enroll them in one of the programs that we have, we can help to eliminate that barrier, be it transportation, clothing, the lack of training. We have the resources to remove those barriers to that if we enroll them in one of our programs.
Yeah, I remember that you guys, do a really nice job at looking at all the things that are necessary to get the type of employment that someone wants.
I would throw something specifically in there that a barrier too, that is Angela's team can help eliminate it just by doing a functional resume. But there's a work history aspect that comes a lot of times to people who are, kind of oppressed in a certain way, because a lot of them, the only work that they can find is somebody where they're working under the table or something. So they may have been working for a long time, but they can't claim any of it. And some agencies are a little bit snobbish about the kind of resumes you put in there. They don't want to just hear about your skills. They want to, they want a record of your dependability and things like that. And so work history is a real thing. When I came out of prison, I literally had to put the jobs that I was doing while I was in prison. Now, granted, I learned euphemistic language pretty well, so I wrote a really good resume and got me some good interviews, so it got me into the door. But still, everybody doesn't necessarily have that, and doesn't know how to, frame certain things. And you can't frame certain things because some of the work you've been doing has been under the table, which makes it illegal. So you can't even act like it's happened. So I would say that is a pretty common obstacle too.
Yep, correct. What other barriers? Transportation, lack of training. Those are childcare, and sometimes that is a real big one. Lack of childcare and the hours. If you have a 9 to 5, you can pretty much find childcare, but anything after 5, that's where you run into difficulty. So childcare is a big one.
Angela, I'm curious to see what an organization would have to do. So if they've got a reputation, and I'll use Henry Ford just as an example, that you need to know someone to get in, that compounds, right? So now you've got folks in Michigan Work that are starting to believe that too, or perhaps, not in an. So then they're not even referring folks because, that kind of goes down through the pipes. What would be a strategy, or what would you see that would be a potential to change reputations around that?
Well, we have career advisors that work with job seekers, and then we have the business service team. They work with the employer to help fill the position. So I would work with the business service coordinators to contact that employer and let him know, hey, we have 5 job seekers that are looking for this position that, you have available. So if the job seeker does not have the skills or training, or maybe the experience, then we would work out what we would do, like an on-the-job training. That's where we would pay part of their wages and the employer pay part, so that they can, kind of like try this person out, see if they're going to be a good fit for their company, and not have to totally pay all of their wages while they're learning. So that's one thing that we can offer here at Michigan Works Southeast.
I didn't know you did that. That's incredible.
And with our, we also do it with the adults, but with our youth, we have our youth program. We call it a paid work experience. And that's where, if we have a youth who could work for an employer in the community for maybe 6 to maybe 12 weeks, and we totally pay their wages for that time, in hopes that at the end of that paid work experience, and if they're a good fit, that employer will hire them. Or if they can't necessarily hire them, that student may be going on to college. So then it's just for him to get some experience in a field, and then he goes on to college. So again, Lori, did I answer your question? I'm sorry. But I think and we still do show individuals the postings for Henry Ford. and, encourage them to apply. But a lot of times we get back, they're not gonna hire me. You gotta know someone. But we
And
still-
you don't have that business relationship with Henry Ford Allegiance Health to have like we do apprenticeships, et cetera. You don't have any of those right now. Like a connection, like you're working together to train people or recruit people for specific roles.
We don't have anyone right now. No.
Okay.
We pay for individuals to go through some medical training, like
Yeah.
at Premier or at Jackson College.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up with you because there are some cool things that Henry Ford Health System, like the big one as a whole, is doing that are not here in Jackson yet, but are what you're talking about. And I think it's worth exploring because those of us that work for the health system are getting notifications all the time that if we would just refer somebody to these, these types of positions, that they'll give us a bonus. And so there are openings that are not getting filled, and there's a gap somewhere. And I'm willing to help work through that, even though I have nothing to do with HR. I think it's an equity issue, and I'm going to follow up with you after this.
Yes, please do. I am here. Like I said, I'm going on vacation, but I'll be here today, rest of today and tomorrow, and then Friday I leave for vacation. But please do. I think that would be huge. We really need that. Thank you.
The obstacles to employment seem to pale in comparison to the obstacles that we face with our clients to getting them into rehab and stuff through Henry Ford, because I don't know where it's come from, but they swear you guys are harvesting organs down there. And so that's where my conversation always has to start. I promise you they're not. I've been there a couple times. So, and I still got all my parts.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's good to know all of the rumors about Henry Ford.
Rumors are reality for people, right?
Yes.
So like we do have
the
to address that.
perceptions.
If they
Yep.
think we're harvesting organs, then we need to build strategies
Yes.
to counter that perception. I mean,
Yep. Because again, like, not to be like back to the data, but if that's what people are saying, that's a data source. And so like, how do we, if we think that we're going to be up here, like, it's this part around like meeting people where they are and where everyone is. And so if people are like not trusting Henry Ford or not able to access resources or any organization, or if there's a perception that they can't get in, like, I love Lori's like, well, I don't know how much power I have, but like, let's see what we can do, right? Because to me, there's a piece of it is as whatever, silly or whatever, if their people are saying they're harvesting organs I can't even get in, and to me there's like okay, well, where did that come from, and like how can we remedy that so that's not the narrative being said,
Yeah. Even if it's just a change with the way people are operating at the front door or admissions or something like that, because I know where part of it comes from. Part of it's from the psychosis that's often, induced from the drug use itself, but still that ends up becoming an obstacle. And if drug use is an obstacle to rehab and you add that to it, that's a genuine issue. I mean, you can't address it directly, but I think it's like trauma-informed care. So that this trauma exists, how to go forward with it. The other thing that I would say, and I know that we're a little bit off topic, but since we're here, is the idea that Henry Ford has a pretty strong reputation for, once they've decided that you're just drug seeking, it's just drug seeking behavior, that you get like dehumanized. Now all you are is an addict. And so the stigma kicks in and they don't want to engage anymore. They feel like, especially when some of them are saying, I don't want any drugs, I want this thing addressed. I think that's an important thing for, Henry Ford to know, because I think that's a big thing that would have to be addressed, and it would take a long time to be able to change. And some of them are drug seeking. That's just the truth of it. But you can't have a one size fits all because it scares some people off. And as crazy as it sounds, you know as well as I do, you have to get creative. We're smaller, so we can get more creative. I took a guy's temperature one time and he didn't show up for 4 months because he thought I was trying to read his mind. So I had to figure out a way so that when he came back, he would take his own temperature. And one of the ways that I had to do it was I had to buy another thermometer. So he had 2 choices. And I told him, I said, I don't know which one you're going to use. So even if I was going to read your mind, I wouldn't know which one to calibrate, you know? And he started taking his own temperature. So sometimes it just takes a little bit of creativity, and creativity requires knowing that something exists. So that's all I'm putting it out there for.
Well, I know we're about to run out of time. I did want to let you know, Adam, of course, Lori just jumped off, but I'm actually helping with a grant, a project. It's, I don't know a lot about it, but it actually is targeting Henry Ford Health System primary care offices and targeting the stigma around opioid use and drug use. And Lori is overseeing it, and I'm helping with some of the activities around providing stigma resources and empathy videos and culturally appropriate conversation pieces to Henry Ford. And it's just, again, the structure I know is huge, but it is targeted towards family practices that have that are under the Henry Ford Health System model.
Right.
So just not saying that that solves the entire world's everything, but I just wanted to acknowledge that as you're saying that, there are some strategies that are happening, outcomes yet to come. But this conversation was great and full, and I took some notes. I'll make sure to send them out after our meeting today.
We've got the notes on the Padlet. We also have the notes from the last meeting. So we'll be compiling all of these, just kind of following the conversation so we all can keep up to date if we're missing meetings and things like that. Next meeting is September 15th at 10 a.m. So just if you put it in the back of your head, it's going to be the 3rd Wednesday of the month. So like put that on your calendar, 3rd Wednesday of the month. So the next meeting is September 15th. If you all are interested in the navigating service systems one, that's the 2nd Tuesday of the month. So that is September 14th. So we'll have 2 that week for anyone that wants to join any of those.
We'll send you all this on the email too. You don't have to remember everything
Okay.
this
All right,
second.
great.
Yeah, we'll keep that up.
Can Amy or Sarah, can I call you? I thought I had filled out the partner's
Profile.
And so when I went into the search, it wasn't there. I thought I had filled it out before. And so I started to do it again before this meeting, and I hit save and close. But when I put my name in, there was nothing there.
Oh no.
We'll take a look and see,
we
but
can
for
help you
sure.
with that
Yeah.
for sure.
I'm looking in the wrong place, and I thought for sure I had done that before, but maybe I could call.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
happy to help walk you through that for sure.
All right, great. Thank you.
Sounds great. All right.
Thanks for
everyone. We
attending.
really appreciate you taking the time and your
Thank you.
insights.
Take care.
Bye.